Well, good morning and welcome back to Will Henry's workshop, where we strive for perfection but take what we can get. I'm kidding. So today we're going to jump right in. With our chamber finished on our 22 barrel, it's time to turn it around, which I've already done, and set it up to cut and crown. The setup for cutting and crowning is just exactly the same as setting it up for chambering. Except it's turned end for end, of course. See if that remote can take a licking. Anyway, turned it end for end, and it dialed in at both ends just as it was for chambering. I just dial in on the outside of the barrel at the muzzle end until I cut it off, and then after I cut it off, I'll dial in right at the edge of the muzzle in the bore to get it running perfectly concentric before I cut the crown. I've measured it off and marked it with my high precision Stanley tape measure. Surprisingly enough, not made in China. It's made in Thailand. But anyway, so without further ado, we'll just shift you around. And see if we can get some kind of a vantage point here. I'm gonna change centers here in the tailstock. The old ball bearing center back in here. I hung this barrel out a little further than I normally would, just so I could get behind the flutes at the other end. Okay. Drop a gear here. Easy enough. So now I'm going to switch cutters here. There we are back again. The tool's magically changed, and so is your viewpoint. Oh shit, there's the damn phone. There we go, back again. That phone call was just a nice lady from Mumbai telling me that I could avoid prosecution if I just give them my bank information. I passed. So anyway, now, like I said, the tool tools in place, and we're ready to go. So to start with, I'm just going to take a light facing cut on this barrel just to clean it up and make sure it's all nice and true. There we go. Then, having done that, a little blast there. I'll go in and indicate the bore here at the muzzle end, and it should be running pretty darn close. And when I'm doing this, I indicate right on the edge, because the indicator could leave a mark on the rifling. So I indicate right at the edge, and then when I recess the crown, that gets rid of any mark that may or may not be there. And it's running out about, indicator run out of about 3/1000ths of an inch, so it's a 1.5 offset. This is a 3-groove barrel, and truth is, a 3-groove barrel just really doesn't indicate easily in a 4-jaw chuck. So. By golly, there it is. So now I'll just cut the recessed crown. So I go in and just enough to break the edge and make for a crown that's a little less fragile. And the next step is just to give it a light polish so it's nice and shiny. So, always critical. When a person does this, you got to be careful not to go into the bore with your emery cloth. There we go. Now is where we find out if we're going to make weight or not. But of course, before we find that out, we have to find out some other things, like where I put the chuck wrench. Always a mystery. And I gotta recover the screwdriver that shockingly I put back where it belonged. Wonder if I couldn't find it. Okay, so there we are. So now we'll just over to the other part of the shop here and see just how close we are on weight. Okay, that barrel is 3 pounds, 6.2, 6.3, oh, settled at 6.2 ounces. 3 pounds, 6.2 ounces. And this considerably fatter fluted barrel, look at that, it's 3 pounds, 6.0. So we've actually shaved off 0.2 of an ounce. And I have another barrel I'm going to have to do the same thing on. I'm going to work on that other barrel first, and then I'll have things set up for the extractor cut, and hopefully nothing else gets in the way. Now the other one I'm working on is a barrel for a Model 95 Winchester, and this barrel, this rifle, came to me with the original barrel, just rusted right out, and so So it's going to get replaced. Now the owner, hoping to stretch that gunsmithing dollar, had sent me a P-17, or 1917 Enfield. You can't call it a P-17, that offends some people. In hopes that I could salvage the barrel off that and put it on his 1895 Winchester. But the problem was that barrel wasn't in all that good a shape when I scrubbed it out and had a good look at it, and it was going to take some creative machining to get it to work anyway. So I donated an old match barrel that I have, and then I recontoured it to where it approximates the Winchester barrel for the forward part of it, and then but at the back there again, it's going to take a little bit of creativity to get this to work. And what I'll probably do here is I'll turn this down, step it as necessary. Then I'm going to cut off the breech end of the original barrel, and I'm going to bore it out so that it fits over the breech end of that replacement barrel, and so that the back end of the barrel is the same. And not only is it the same, but it'll still have the same markings on it and everything. So I'll end up necessarily with a little bit of a step, but that shouldn't be too obtrusive, and it'll fit the forearm and so on. So this is kind of an interesting one too. Now, so in doing this, it's not a lot different than doing the rimfire. You know, it's the same routine. I measure the receiver, the depth of the bolt face, and so on to establish my headspace measurements. I have, of course, the original barrel to take measurements from, and as you can see, it's kind of a complex breech. You know, it's counterbored. It's got a cut for the extractor and ejector, and a guide. So it's a fairly complex breech, and then of course I'll have to dovetail the new barrel to hold the forearm, and then dovetail for the sights. But so anyway, like I said, the routine's much the same. I'm going to switch the 22's bolt back with its fellow parts there, and switch to my other depth mic because it's already set up shorter. And then I can take my measurement to the bolt face. And it's always kind of interesting with these old ones to see how much they've worn, if the headspace is loose or whatever. Sometimes these guns, you know, see a lot of wear. They see a lot of use and abuse, and so you just never know. So on this one, I'm getting a measurement of 820 for headspace, and it seems to me on the old barrel, it was just about 4,000ths loose in that. I'm going to double check that. But anyway, 820 for my headspace, and then for the rest of it, like I say, I'll just duplicate the original barrel. The tenon on this is also 16 threads to the inch, but it's, I believe, 15/16, 0.9375 nominal diameter, and but that's all. Well, in fact, I'm ahead of the game because I've already cut those threads. And again, it was virtually the same setup and everything as with the rimfire target rifle, and indeed all rifles are done the same. Now later on, I might just do one segment on various ways a person can set barrels up to do this. You know, whether it was when we start over here. When I first started, it was common practice. Well, number one, we contoured all of our blanks. We bought them as 1 1/4 blanks and turned the contour out of that. And then we did all our threading and fitting between centers. And that was a relatively good way to do it because everything was aligned. So you'd cut your threads between centers, and because you're between centers and driving the barrel with the dog, you could remove the barrel and check it on, try it on the receiver and put it back in, and the threads would automatically index, and so you could pick up and continue on. So that worked really well. Then after you had the barrels threaded and fitted to the receiver, then you'd set it up in the, my first mentor had a pretty good 3-jaw chuck, so he just grabbed everything in the 3-jaw chuck and chambered it there. Another fellow I know who was a good maker did the same thing, and as far as concentricity was concerned, it worked out okay. As long as the tailstock was well aligned and so on, it worked out okay, but not always. So I generally grabbed the barrel by the muzzle end in the 3-jaw chuck or the 4-jaw chuck, whatever was on the machine, and then ran the other end in the steady rest chamber. And in general, that's a method that that a lot of people still use today, and it works out well. The one reason that it was popular back in the day was a lot of the lathes did not have a big enough hole through the headstock to run the barrels through the headstock, so you kind of had to use the steady rest. But using a steady rest is a good way of doing things, providing your steady track or where you're running the steady on is concentric to the bore. And in theory, when you machined that, you made it concentric to the bore, and if you did, you could get good results. Now, because barrels aren't perfectly straight, your results weren't always perfect, because the friend of the reamer, would be following the barrel that had diverged a little bit from the true axis. So, like I said, it was a decent way of doing things, and but then I started to set the barrels up in the 4-jaw chuck because I didn't like using the 3-jaw chuck, and then dialing in the tailstock as I did. Well, you saw it on the before I chambered the 22 barrel, and then it occurred to me that once I'd done that, there was no reason to do the rest of it. I might as well do all the work in the headstock, and so that's the way I started doing it way back, and that's mostly the way I do it now. Sometimes there's little variations because of the particular job, but in general, that's how I do it. And with this one, I'll do it that way because it's, like I say, once it's in there, it's set up, it's easy. From a speed standpoint, I think the quickest way is probably in the steady rest, but it's kind of a toss-up because really it takes very little time to set one up in the 4-jaw chuck, and once you're set up, you can do everything there. And the only difficulties you run into with any barrel and with any setup is if the barrel isn't perfectly straight, and if you're trying for real high precision, like if you're building bench rest or F-class rifle, you want to get that chamber as straight as you possibly can. And in fact, it almost doesn't matter what you're building. You're going to be a lot happier with a straight one than you are a crooked one. And so anyway, there we go. Now, so this this action, like I say, I measured it, and it measures 820 down to the bolt face. You can see at the front of it, it was kind of crooked around where the barrel seat is straight enough, but surrounding metal above it was not on the same plane as that contact for the barrel shoulder. So I had to file that to get it to match up, and it came out just fine, and so we get a valid measurement. Now, as I said, I'll check on this other barrel just to see what the headspace on it is, just out of curiosity. I can find my headspace gauge. So the length of this tenon was 874, I believe, and yes, 874, and so the back of my minimum gauge is 59 thousandths. Let's see here. So the headspace measurement on this barrel is 815. So there was 5 thousandths of an inch of head clearance or headspace on this, which is well, it's kind of borderline, but it's not bad, but we'll try for a minimum measurement on this when we put it together, and so there we go. That's it for this morning. I'm kind of feeling a little peckish, so I'm going to get something to eat, and when I come back, we'll have that other barrel, this Model 95 barrel, set up to chamber and machine the breech, and there we'll have it. So until next time, well, and if appropriate to this job, because we're going to have to do some strange stuff to get that barrel to work. I think the saying of the day is, where there's a will, there's a way. And so we'll see you later. Now, where did I put the? Oh, it's right there.